So this morning, what we're going to do, we're going to talk about some ideas of really learning how to see things as they are. Not as we think they are, not as we believe them to be, but as they are. The title of the talk is You Can't Believe Everything You See. You just can't believe everything you see. It's all not true, you know. It's amazing these days. You go on the internet and you look at the pictures of when Hurricane Sandy came up the East Coast and it flooded the subways in New York. It wasn't just a couple of hours that people went on Photoshop and they had pictures of gigantic sharks swimming in the subway in New York. Yeah. Of course, it wasn't true. You can't believe everything that you see. So we're talking this morning about how important it is for us to recognize what it is that we are seeing and what it is that we are believing, and to catch ourselves when what we are seeing and what we are believing is not true, not spiritually true. In biblical terms in the New Testament, you're familiar with this. It says, don't judge by the appearances, right, but judge by the righteous judgment. And what is the righteous judgment? We could spend a lifetime with that, and we should. And in Buddhism, we're told to learn to see things as they are. We must learn to see things as they are, to accept things as they are. But that raises the question, how are they? Are they like we believe they are? Are they like we think they are? Are they like we expect them to be? Or is there a different reality? Perhaps a deeper reality, we might call it, another way. So these are the ideas that we want to talk about this morning, and a lot of this comes from Emma Curtis Hopkins, her book on. I'm holding it up for those on YouTube. Her book is called, one of her books, the one I was looking at this morning, is called Scientific Christian Mental Practice, and she has an entire chapter in here called Righteous Judgment, learning to see things righteously the right way. Now, Emma Curtis Hopkins is one of the, I think, one of the best teachers of what we call New Thought, but she's not easy to read. Emma Curtis Hopkins wrote probably in the 1860s, 1870s, somewhere around there, and she was, I believe, very well educated in terms of she can write a sentence or a paragraph, and she can start out by talking about something that was in the Old Testament, and then she can pull out a related piece of the New Testament, and then she can switch over to Greek mythology, and then she can switch over to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and she could take all of that and she can just wrap it together and demonstrate how all of these different teachings are trying to teach the same truth. So I'm not familiar with everything that she was familiar with, so I have to go and look up when she talks about a Greek god so-and-so, I have to go look it up, or an Egyptian god so-and-so, I have to go find that. The quest for knowledge, of course, helps me to remember it better, but I'm just saying she's not an easy read, but she's a very worthwhile read. If you can find any of her works available on the internet, certainly it's worth time. So just wanted to mention a little bit, when our grandchildren were over here about a month or so ago, they love to get onto Netflix and show Grandpa all the things that I didn't know were there. Probably they're showing me things that their parents don't want them to watch, but they have all of these neat little shows that they turn on. And one of them showed me this program, and it was all about how your mind can be fooled, how your senses can be fooled. It started off with magic. It was showing you how magic tricks were done, but it was more in line of, how the brain works, or how the mind works, or how consciousness works, however you want to put it. And the way they start the show is they do a magic trick, and then they show you how the magic trick is done. And they do that to show you what you missed the first time that you saw the trick. So one thing they did was the magician took out and held up like 5 cards, and had 5 cards pointing at the camera so you could see the 5 cards. And they said, now I'm going to hold up some cards, and I want you to pick one card, and I want you to concentrate on that card, and I want you to memorize that card. And they held up the 5 cards, and they're kind of moving them around. They're not still. They're kind of making you work at it a little bit. And the stuff kind of flashing in the background, all these kind of things, making you really concentrate on the card. So I picked my card. It was the Queen of Diamonds. And then they went back and they said, now what we're going to do is we're going to take the card that you selected, the one that you memorized, and we're going to make it disappear. And then they hold up the 5 cards again, and sure enough, the Queen of Diamonds is gone. Not there. And I'm thinking, that's really cool. How did they know that I was going to pick the Queen of Diamonds? You know, and I'm struggling with that. And I'm thinking, you know, well, when the cards were zooming around and moving around, did somehow they kind of make the Queen of Diamonds look bigger than the other cards, or did they kind of push it to the forefront with some kind of zoom technology on the camera or the editing program? Just how did they do that? And I was kind of really struggling with trying to figure out how they did it, because there was no doubt I picked the Queen of Diamonds the first time through, and the Queen of Diamonds was gone. When they get to explaining how they did the trick, they said, now you noticed that the card that you wanted was missing. Yeah, absolutely. He said, but did you notice that all 5 of the cards were different than the 5 that we showed the first time around? And then they held up the 2 stacks of cards side by side so you could look at them. And sure enough, not only was the Queen of Diamonds missing, but the other 4 cards that they held up the first time were missing. They were all gone, see? So here I'm thinking that somehow they tricked me into picking the Queen of Diamonds. How did they manage to trick me into picking the Queen of Diamonds? And all these things are going through my head. And all they did was change all the 5 cards out. It's pretty simple the way that they did it. But the way that it worked is misdirection. It worked in what the magicians refer to as misdirection. They planted a seed in my consciousness, and they asked me to quickly pick out a card and concentrate on that card. And while they were telling me to concentrate on that card, they had the cards moving around, they had lights flashing in the background, they had all kinds of things that would tend to distract me. But because I was focusing on that one card, the Queen of Diamonds, I didn't see everything else that was going on. I didn't see the other 4 cards that were in the stack. They were there, you know, but I was not aware of them. I was so locked into what I wanted to see, the one that I had selected, that I really didn't see the other things that were going on. So they went on to show some other tricks that they were doing, and these were kind of elaborate stage performances that you've seen the magicians do. And of course, when they play through it, it's played from start to finish in one sequence. But when they actually did the trick, they would film a certain amount, they would stop the camera, then they would start filming again, they would stop the camera. And when they stopped the camera, they would change things around, you know. So after, as you're watching it play back, you think that something just magically appeared in the scene, you know, but it didn't. They stopped the camera and it rolled in, and that's how the person gets in the box. Those kind of things, people that just suddenly jump up. And what they did while they were doing this demonstration, they changed so much around in the background. They changed the color of the set. They changed the props that were in the back of the set. They changed the people who were standing behind the magician. They changed all of these things around. And yet the first time that they played it through, you don't notice any of that, because they're telling you to concentrate on whatever they're telling you to concentrate on. You know, they put the tablecloth over the box, and they're spinning the box around, and all these kind of things to distract you. And what you're doing is you're focusing your attention on that box. You're trying not to be fooled, so you're concentrating on what they wanted you to concentrate on all along. And while you're doing that, you completely miss everything that's going on behind. And I only bring that out to demonstrate the point. You cannot believe what you see. You cannot believe what you see, because what you are seeing is a very, very limited slice of what is totally going on. And what we tend to do is we tend to see what we expect to see. Okay? So we kind of look at the world around us. And if we expect to see good and kind and loving and trusting people, we will see them. We will see them. They will be there. They will be in our lives. They will be in our experience. And if we tend to expect to see people who are mean, who are evil, who are selfish, those sorts of things. Those are the kind of people that we will see. Those are the kind of people that will appear in our lives. There's an old Quaker tale of the two men sitting on the porch, and a car comes down the country road and says, "Can you tell me how to get to such and such a town?" And the gentleman pointed, and he said, "It's in that direction, about 10 miles. And the driver said, well, what kind of people will I find there?" And the old man on the porch said, "Well, what kind of people did you find in the last town that you were in?" And the guy told him, and the old man said, "Well, those are the kind of people you'll meet up there." And then another car came by, and the same thing happened. And the other young man who was sitting on the porch says, "How come you told the one driver that he was going to find good and kind and loving people in that town, and you told the other driver that he was going to find mean and selfish people?" And the old man's answer was, they're going to find what they expect. They're going to find what they're looking for. Now, what this means is a couple things that we have to think about. See, we're not very good, I would say, we're not very practiced at recognizing that what we see is not necessarily the way it is, but rather it is the way that we are seeing reflected back to us our own expectations of life. And in most cases, what we are seeing reflected back to us is some part of ourselves. I know we hate to hear this when we embark on our spiritual growth and we go to our teacher and we say, "Boy, I'm just so annoyed by people who do this particular thing." And the teacher will say, "Well, when do you do that? When do you behave that way?" Because what you're really upset with is you're really upset with the fact that you do it. You're projecting it on other people. You're seeing it in other people. What you're seeing in other people is something that you want to work on in your own self. That's why you are aware of it. That's why you're ready to let this go. And in Eastern traditions, they tell us if somebody upsets you, you should thank them because they have revealed to you an area of your consciousness that you are ready to work on. You are ready to let go. We all go to sleep every night, and part of that period that we are asleep, we dream. Right? Other parts of that period that we are asleep, we are just simply unconscious, usually unconscious. Now, we can train our consciousness to be alert and to be lucid while our bodies sleep. But for most of us, it is an experience of either we drift off into unconsciousness and then dreams arise. So we're either unconscious or we're dreaming. And what happens is, now mind you, even when we are unconscious, that is, we are not aware, we're not really self-aware, at least at that moment, there's something that's still paying attention, right? If there's a noise down the hall, if one of the children starts to cry out or for mommy, things like that, we wake up. We wake up. There's something that is tuned in and turned on and paying attention. There's something that knows what's going on, even though our conscious awareness or self-awareness seems to be unconscious at the time. And then we go into dreams. And when we go into dream, we have this great story, this great play that unfolds before our very eyes. We have all these characters, we have all of these settings, we have all of these interactions, all of these events that take place, and they are completely real to us in that dream state. We never stop, or almost never stop, to ask ourselves, is this a dream? Is this a dream or is this real? Is this a dream? How can I be doing the things that I'm doing? Maybe we're underwater and we don't have a scuba tank on. Maybe we're flying and we don't have an airplane. Maybe instead of walking, we're just kind of floating above the ground. all kinds of things that we do in our dreams that are just completely impossible to do. I remember, just popped into my head the other night, I was having a dream, and I don't remember much about it except I was using my chainsaw. And the chain on the chainsaw wasn't working right, and I just reached over with my other hand and I grabbed the chain on the chainsaw and I shook it back and forth while the engine was still running until the chain started to turn. And I thought to myself, wow, that's cool. I didn't even cut my fingers off. Never occurred to me that it was a dream. It just popped into my head now, but it never occurred to me that it was a dream. So in our dreams, we never kind of question. We never kind of question the reality. We never kind of question what's going on. We accept it as if it is so, as if it is real. And yet it's not. The whole thing is a projection of our own consciousness. The whole thing is a projection of whatever's been going on in our minds. We have all of these other characters in our dreams, and yet we created each and every one of them. They are there by our invitation, and in fact, each and every one of them is a projection of our own self, because we are creating them, right? We are the author writing their character. We are putting some of ourselves into these people in the dreams. So we have this entire experience while we are asleep, or while our bodies are asleep. We have this entire experience that seems absolutely real to us. And yet it is all a figment of our imagination. It is all a creation of our imagination. It is not at all the way things are. It is the way that we expect them to be. It is the way that we want them to be. It is the way that we have created them. And yet it seems so real to us that even if we do something impossible, like running our hand over a running chainsaw without getting hurt, even if we do something that is entirely impossible, we don't stop and ask ourselves, wait a second, is that the way things really are? Or is this a dream? Or is this a dream? And what we have to stop, we have to stop right here for a second and think about consciousness, and think about word, and think about the law. So the consciousness is the awareness that is back of everything. Perhaps it is the first in the sequence. And then we have our word, which is a reflection of our consciousness. You know, people reveal more about themselves by what they say than they realize. So if we are always complaining about something or someone, we are really revealing our innermost beliefs, our deepest feelings. We may say that we believe that God is love, and everybody is an expression of God, and I love everybody. We may say that. But if the majority of our conversation is filled with ideas of fear, or of doubt, or of hate, or we're constantly looking about and seeing selfishness and greed and evil acts about us, what we are truly believing is in the selfishness and in the greed, and not in the love that we profess. We understand then that our word is a combination of our thought and our feelings, our thought and our emotion. It is our deepest belief. And that word is acted upon by law, by the law of mind, as we refer to it. In traditional theology, you might call it the Holy Spirit, the doer of the word. In the New Testament, we're told, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt amongst us. And while traditional theology refers to that as the person of Jesus, we can say that that's true of each and every one of us. At the start of the creative process in our lives is our word, our belief, and the law acting upon our word makes it flesh, brings it into our experience, puts it right here in our lives. Just as if in our dream things just boom manifest in our dream and they are there. We wake up into a different level of the dream and things are here. So if we truly understand that, we truly believe that, then we can come to recognize that each and every person that we run into in the course of a day, each and every experience that comes into our day, each and every event that comes into our day is there by right of our consciousness. Just as when we are asleep and dreaming, everything that is there must be by right of our consciousness because our consciousness is all that there is. The things that come into us, to our attention during the day are there by right of our consciousness because we are focusing on what we have been led to believe, what we have been pre-programmed to believe, and we are missing everything else. We are missing all of the background activity on the stage as the magician does the trick. We are missing all of the other things that don't agree with our predetermined way of thinking. And if we wish to grow spiritually, we have to break out of that habit. We have to get out of that. Joel Goldsmith talks about awakening from the Adam dream. He says that if you go back to the book of Genesis, it tells us that God put Adam into a deep sleep. But it never once tells us that Adam woke up. Not once. And the way he interprets that is that we are all still stuck in that dream. We are all dreaming that dream together. We are all suffering under the delusions of our own minds. We are attracting into our lives, into our waking lives, we are attracting into our waking lives people who want to have the same dream that we want to have. They want to have the same experience that we want to have. They are there in our lives by right of consciousness. And as we begin to awaken from that dream, and remember, we have to awaken individually. Each one of us has to awaken. As we awaken from that dream, as we step into the fifth kingdom of Troer that I talked about last week, then we start to recognize, then we start to realize that the experiences that we've been having, the way that we've been told that the world works, the way that we've been told that God works, are not necessarily true. But rather they are reflections of expectations, of ideas, and nothing more than ideas that people have created and people have adopted and people have repeated to one another, so that they tend to believe that they're true, and because they believe that they're true, they get to experience them as being true. But it is our job, for our own consciousness, for our own soul, is to awaken. We have to shake off the Adam dream. We have to shake off the delusion. We have to shake off the sleep. And we have to stop and say to ourselves, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Is that right? Is that really the way that it is? Or does it just appear to be so? Does it just appear to be so? So what Emma Curtis Hopkins invites us to do when she tells us to adopt righteous judgment is she tells us to go back in and think about all of these different things that we have been told about God. And we've been told about our relationship with God. Excuse me. And we've been told about matter and our bodies. And to ask ourselves, is that true? Or is that just something that somebody made up And people shared these made-up ideas for so many thousands of years that they have come to believe that they are true. And because they have come to believe that they are true, they selectively see everything that reinforces their preconceived notion. And they ignore the rest. They ignore the rest. So Ms. Hopkins tells us we have to start with omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence. We have to start with that because that is probably as close to a definition of God as we can get without imposing some other thoughts upon us. If we say God is the Father, that has imposed a thought upon us. Whatever Father means to that person is now part of this idea of God. And how can that which is God be either father or mother? God is spirit. We all came from God, but God is not a human like father, nor a human like mother, nor a combination of father and mother. It's something entirely different. So we've been given these ideas, and they are part of our culture. They are part of our collective consciousness. They are part of the human psyche. That somehow God has created us. Somehow God has allowed us to sin. And then God has heaped punishment upon us in the form of sickness, in the form of suffering, in the form of lack, in the form of death. And we believe that. See, we've been predisposed to believe that, like the magician saying, concentrate on the card. We look for that. We expect to see that. And it is all throughout our culture. You can see it all over the place when they talk about somebody getting their just due, or payback, or karma, or all of these different things that are subtly built into our culture. If somebody gets sick, we're told, well, somehow God is sending them a trial to strengthen them, or somehow God is testing them, or somehow God is punishing them, particularly with somebody we don't like who gets sick. God is finally getting them. They're finally getting their just due. And what we have to do is we have to take a deep breath and step out of that. And as satisfying as the human ego might be to relish in the suffering of an enemy, we need to step back away from that and say, that's not true. That can't be true. God sends the rain to fall on the just and the unjust alike. There is only one mind, and that mind is God. There is only one life, and that life is God. Omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence. God has never been sick, never could be sick, never will be sick. So how could the God who knows nothing of sickness make us sick? Couldn't be. We need to wake up. We need to say, wait a minute. Wait a minute. There's something else going on here. There's something else happening here. I can't believe everything that I see. I have to back away from it. I have to recognize that that is an explanation that human beings have come up with, and it sounds reasonable. And Emma Curtis Hopkins tells us, if you think about it, in order for a lie to be believed, it has to be reasonable. It has to seem reasonable. She gives the example, if you were visiting someone in a mental hospital and one of the patients came up to you and he was all disheveled and he says to you, your mother stole my watch. Would you be upset by that? No. You know that this person is ill. You know that your mother would never do such a thing, and you know this person never had a watch in the first place. So why would it bother you? It's completely untrue. But if you were walking down the street and a distinguished looking gentleman came up to you and pointed to someone who's homeless and says, that person just stole my watch, well, you might believe it. You might believe it. Because it's plausible. It's plausible. So what Emma Curtis Hopkins is telling us is that we have to understand that we have been inundated with plausible lies. We have been given things to know about God. We have been given things to know about our relationship with God that are simply not true. People have created all kinds of theologies, all kinds of mythologies, all kinds of stories to explain why sin and pain and suffering all exist. And then they come up with these convoluted ways for us to escape that, some of which involve sending them money so that they will relieve our pain for us, relieve our suffering, relieve our sense of loss. And what we have to do is step away from that and say none of that is real. It may be an experience that we are having, an experience of sickness, an experience of pain, an experience of loss. It may be an experience. We're not saying it is not an experience. What we're saying is it's not real. It's like a dream. It is a projection of consciousness, and when the consciousness that is causing it changes, the experience changes. The experience did not have the power to keep itself going. Once the consciousness that was causing it was changed, the experience had to change. We go back to the example of the movie in the movie theater. Once you change the film in the projector, what you see on the screen changes. The old movie doesn't persist. It is not there kind of in the background. There's no struggle between the two movies. The instant that the film in the projector has changed, the experience that we get looking at the screen has changed. So what we want to do is we want to come and we want to explore some of the really, really deep questions of life. Emma Curtis Hopkins tells us to contemplate there is no such thing as sin. There is no such thing as sickness. There is no such thing as death. There is no such thing as matter. And we listen to that and we say, what? How can that be? We are surrounded with matter. We are surrounded with appearances of sin. We are surrounded with appearances of sickness. And we are surrounded with appearances of death. And what she's telling us is, yes, but they are not real. They do not have power to sustain themselves. They are projections of consciousness. They are illusions or delusions of the mind. And they are not real. And the reason that we know that they are not real is that God is all that there is. God is all that there is. When in doubt, repeat, God is all that there is. Excuse me. God is not matter. God is spirit. God is energy. That energy takes on the form of matter, but it is God. God has never been sick. God could never sin, and there's no sin but an error. But God could never make an error, so God could never sin. And God is eternal life, the same yesterday, today, and forever. It was never born, it will never die. Excuse me. So as we kind of work our way, shake our way out of this Adam dream, shake our way out of this this collective delusion that we suffer through as human beings, as we start to fight our way back to the origin, to the beginning, we recognize that in the absolute, there is no sin, there is no sickness, there is no death, there is no evil, there is nothing that can hold power over us. There is only our consciousness, and there is only God. So what we want to do then is we want to catch ourselves. We want to observe ourselves. And this is very important. Emma Curtis Hopkins tells us if you were helping a child do its mathematics homework, and the child came to you with a problem on the page, and he or she had made an error, you would simply say, well, no, that's not the right answer. And then you would go ahead and you would show them how to get the right answer. You would just say that's wrong. You would say, well, that's not exactly right. Let's take another look at this and let's see if there's another way we can find an answer. And then you would demonstrate the right way. You wouldn't just simply tell them no. And you wouldn't be angry with them. You wouldn't be upset with them. You wouldn't say, oh, it's terrible. What are they doing in the schools today? All those kind of things. No, you would just simply say, well, that's not right. Let's look at it another way. And that's the way we need to treat ourselves. See, that's the way we need to treat ourselves as we go forward, because we have a tendency to get upset with ourselves once we start to say, oh my God, why did I believe all of this crap that has been drilled into my head for all of these years? Why did I ever accept that as true? And what we need to do is take a deep breath. We need to step back and say, well, no, that's just not the truth, because God is all that there is. So as we go about our day, if we find ourselves becoming upset with another person or the activities of another person, we need to take a deep breath and step back and say, but why did I see that? Why did I pay attention to that when there's all this other stuff going on out there that I didn't even notice? Why did I pay attention to that? And then what we want to do is we want to say, and that's not the truth. See, that is not ultimate reality. That is simply an experience that I am having, because I am noticing them, and I am judging them, and I am taking their activities and I am blowing them into something even bigger. So perhaps we see somebody doing something selfish, and then we go off on this tangential thought about how much selfishness there is in the world, how much greed there is in the world, and how it's all the root cause of all human problems, and we get bigger and we get bigger and we get bigger and we get bigger in our mind. And what we want to do is stop right there and say, no, that's not the truth. The truth is that God is all that there is. And there's enough and plenty for everyone. And I don't have to be upset with myself, and I don't have to see what I'm upset with in myself reflected back to me in the activities of this other person. But what I need to do is to dissolve, to erase the impact of race consciousness, the delusion of human thought on my mind that tells me there's not enough to go around. Lori and I once met a man. We were at a seminar for speakers and trainers. It was being held in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And this gentleman was there, and his wife owned a real estate agency in Atlanta, and he trained all of the sales agents, and her agency was number one in something that year, and they were at an annual gathering of realtors, and one of his wife's competitors came over, and said to him, he says, he says, your wife's very lucky to have you doing all the training, all the in-house training of the agents. She's got the best agency in Atlanta. He says, I'd give my right arm if you would come and give that training to some of my people. And the man said, well, he says, get out your calendar. Let's pick a time. I'll be over. And the realtor said, what? The guy said, yeah. He says, I don't have a bit of a problem with doing that. He says, I'll come over and train your people. He says, I'll give them all the training that I gave my wife's people. And the realtor looked at him and he couldn't believe it. He says, why would you come and train your wife's competitors? And the man says, well, I don't see us as competitors. He says, the idea of competition means that the pie is limited and we each have to fight one another over the same pie. He said, I think if we're all working this together, we just keep making the pie bigger and bigger and bigger, and we all get more and more and more, but we're not taking away from each other. It was just a totally different view, a totally different way of looking at life. The traditional view is that we must fight, we must struggle, we must take from one another to get what we want. And this man chose to see that there was a way for everybody to have enough and plenty. And he was willing to do something that that the conventional wisdom called crazy. He was willing to go out and train his wife's competitors so that they could increase their sales as well. So what we want to do, hopefully what we want to do as we go through this week, is we want to just stop and recognize that we are not seeing the world as it is. We are seeing the world as we have been programmed to expect it to be. We see ideas of sin, ideas of sickness, I see ideas of death, ideas of punishment, of God testing me, and God can do none of those things. Why would God need to test us? Why would omniscience need to have a way of figuring out if we knew or we didn't know? It doesn't make sense. Why would God create us out of itself and then condemn us to hell for eternity? It doesn't make sense, you see. So what we want to do is to recognize that our vision of the world, our view of the world, our expectations of the world, they are causing what we see in the world. So we have a great mirror that reflects back to us what we truly believe. And then what we want to do is take an opportunity to just say, no, that's not right. That's not the way it is. Let's take another way of looking at this. And let's go back to what we truly believe to be true of God. Omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence. Perhaps a simple way to do that is, if you find something that's upsetting you, just simply ask yourself, how would God see this? How would God experience this? And bring ourselves to that point of view. We have to come to a decision point in our growth. Do we truly believe that God is all there is? Or do we believe that that's something we want to believe someday? Is today the day? Or is it perhaps true that God is not all that there is God and the devil and there is all these other things? We have to go back and ask ourselves, what is it that we believe? What is it that we expect to see in this world? Because that is what is going to determine the course of our lives. Excuse me. We can't believe everything that we see, but we can know that what we see is what we believe. And if we wish to live in a different world, we must believe in a different world. We must allow the erroneous thoughts in our consciousness to be dissolved into the nothingness from which they came by exposing them to the light of the truth. God is all there is. omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. There's no such thing as sin, or sickness, or death. Matter has no power over us, for matter has no power of its own. We go back and we work in cause, which is consciousness, and we ignore effect, which is the illusion. So let's take this week to practice. Let's take this week to go forward. And when we observe something and form an opinion about something, let's ask ourselves, is that the only possible explanation? Why did I choose that explanation over all the possible explanations? And is that explanation in alignment with what I know to be true of God? God is all there is. Let's let more of God come into our experience this week by setting our intention to stop believing everything we see and seeing things as they are, as God's love in action, in us, as us, and through us. And so it is.